He came to the abandoned dam, looking for silence. But the silence there felt heavy, like something beneath it was still breathing. His dog stopped first, completely still, ears locked on a place no one else could hear. No voices, no movement, just a faint, unnatural rhythm coming from deep inside the concrete. Then Silas heard it too, one soft knock, and after a pause, something knocked back. In that moment, the veteran Navy SEAL understood this wasn't an empty place. Someone was still alive below, waiting to be found. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Veteran Dog Stories. Silas Wren stood on the high ridge, boots planted firmly against the cold stone, looking down at the dam as if it were something alive. Something that had simply learned how to stay still. From above, it stretched across the narrow river like the spine of a forgotten giant. The concrete had turned the color of dried blood and rust, eaten slowly by time and weather. Trees had grown too close, their roots pushing into cracks, their branches leaning over the structure as if trying to pull it back into the earth. Small control huts dotted the top, square, silent, their windows dark and blind. It was beautiful. That was the problem. The kind of beauty that didn't belong to something abandoned. Silas exhaled slowly, his breath faint in the cold air. At 43, he carried himself with a quiet, grounded weight. He stood tall, 6'1", with broad shoulders shaped not by vanity, but by years of discipline. His body was lean and efficient, built for function. The olive field jacket hung naturally over him, worn at the edges, but clean, as if it had never truly been taken off since another life. Beneath it, a red and dark blue plaid shirt softened his silhouette just enough to suggest he had once belonged somewhere ordinary. His face was angular, defined by a sharp jawline and light stubble that never quite became a full beard. His skin carried the mark of long exposure to sun and wind, a quiet toughness etched into it. His eyes, blue-gray, steady and deeply observant, didn't wander. They studied. They measured. They remembered. Behind him, the engine of the truck ticked softly as it cooled. Beside him, Rook did not move. The German shepherd stood still at the edge of the ridge, his black and tan coat catching the light in sharp contrast. His build was balanced, muscular without bulk, every line of him designed for speed and precision. His ears were upright, angled forward, not in alarm, but in focus. His tail remained still, neither tense nor relaxed. Rook wasn't looking at the dam. He was looking into it. Silas didn't speak at first. He didn't need to. Years ago, words had stopped being necessary between them. "What is it, boy?" he murmured eventually, voice low, almost thoughtful. Rook didn't turn. Instead, the dog took a single step forward, then another. Silas followed his line of sight. There, just below the ridge, running along the upper span of the dam, was a length of old metal railing, rusted, bent in places, forgotten. Rook moved toward it with slow, deliberate steps. That alone was enough. Silas felt it then. Not fear, not exactly. Recognition. He stepped forward, boots scraping lightly against stone, and reached out to touch the railing. Cold. Still. Dead metal. For a moment, nothing happened. The wind passed through the trees. The river below moved quietly, its surface reflecting fractured sunlight like broken glass. Silence pressed in. Then, a faint tremor, so slight it could have been imagination. Silas frowned, fingers tightening around the metal. There it was again. Not a vibration like wind or loose structure. Something intentional, He leaned closer, pressed his palm flat, waited. And then, knock, knock, knock. A pause. Knock, knock. Silas didn't move. His breath didn't change, but something inside him did. The sound hadn't come through the air. It had traveled through the metal, through the structure, from somewhere deep inside the dam. Rook sat down. Not casually, not resting. He sat with perfect stillness, spine straight, ears forward, eyes locked on the concrete below. A trained response. Silas swallowed once, slow. "That's not water," he said quietly. Rook didn't react. He didn't need to. Silas listened again. Nothing. Just the river, just the wind. But his hand remained on the railing, as if letting go would mean admitting it hadn't been real. His jaw tightened, because he knew that feeling. Years ago, in a place far from here, sand instead of trees, heat instead of cold, he had felt something like this. A signal, faint, unclear, easy to dismiss, and he had dismissed it. Hours later they found what was left of a man who had been waiting. That memory had never left him. It didn't shout, it didn't accuse, it just stayed. Silas stepped back from the railing. The dam stretched below, silent again, as if it had swallowed the sound whole. Rook suddenly stood. No warning, no hesitation. He moved away from the railing, trotting along the ridge in a tight arc before stopping several feet away, near a section where the concrete met exposed steel supports. He lowered his head, pressed his nose close, not sniffing, not searching, but listening in his own way. Then he did something rare. He stepped backward and sat again, in a different position, blocking a new direction. Silas stared at him. "You're mapping it," he whispered. The realization settled slowly. Rook wasn't reacting to a random sound. He was tracing it, following it, like a line that ran through the dam itself. Silas moved to where Rook had repositioned, placed his hand against a vertical support beam, waited. For a long moment, nothing came. Then, knock. Weaker, distant. But there. Silas exhaled slowly. "Not one spot," he murmured. "A path." Rook's ears flicked once, agreement. And just like that, the silence of the dam no longer felt empty. It felt occupied. Silas stepped back fully now, eyes scanning the structure from top to bottom. The control huts, the spillways, the cracked concrete. If something or someone was inside, it wasn't random. It was placed, hidden, contained. He turned toward the path leading down. "We're not done here," he said. Rook was already moving. The descent to the dam was narrow, overgrown, the kind of path that disappeared if you didn't know where to look. Pine needles softened the ground, and broken branches snapped underfoot with quiet resistance. The air grew cooler the lower they went, the scent of water and damp earth thickening with each step. Up close, the dam felt different, larger, heavier, like standing beside something that remembered more than it showed. Silas walked along the top span now, passing one of the small control huts. Its door hung slightly open, swaying just enough to creak with the wind. He paused, listened. Nothing. He stepped inside. The interior smelled of rust and old dust. Panels lined the walls, dead instruments frozen in time. Gauges sat at 0. Wires hung loose like veins cut clean, abandoned, but not destroyed. Silas crouched slightly, scanning the floor. No footprints, no recent disturbance. He stepped back out. Rook hadn't followed him inside. The dog stood further along the dam, facing one of the spillway sections, where water once would have surged through with force. Now it barely trickled. Too little for a structure this size. Silas approached slowly. "What do you hear?" he asked. Rook's posture shifted. Not aggressive, focused. The kind of stance that meant, pay attention now. Silas stepped closer to the edge. The drop below was steep. The river narrowed through the spillway channel, dark water sliding between concrete walls. And then he heard it again. Not through the railing this time, not through metal, but faintly, carried through the structure itself. Knock, knock. Silas froze. His pulse didn't spike. It tightened, controlled, measured. He crouched slightly, leaning closer to the concrete. "Hey," he said, voice low but steady. "If that's you, do it again." Silence. Long enough to doubt. Then, knock, just one. Barely there, but real. Silas closed his eyes for half a second, and when he opened them, the calm in them had changed. Not gone. Just sharpened. Rook moved closer, standing beside him now, shoulder aligned with Silas's leg. 2 sentries, listening to something buried beneath stone and water. Silas spoke again, softer this time. "You're not alone," he said. The wind shifted slightly, brushing across the dam like a breath drawn too slowly. No answer came. But Silas no longer needed one. He stood, looked out across the dam, then back down into the spillway. The silence hadn't returned. It had just changed shape, and somewhere beneath them, something was still waiting. The road down from the dam narrowed as it wound through the forest, as if it had been forgotten by maps, but not by memory. Silas drove slowly, not because the terrain demanded it, but because his mind did. The image of the dam lingered behind his eyes, not the structure itself, but the feeling of it, the way the silence had weight, the way the air had seemed to hold something just beneath it, like a breath not yet released. Beside him, Rook sat upright in the passenger seat, still, alert, watching the passing trees as if they might move differently than they should. Silas glanced at him once. "You're still on it," he said quietly. Rook didn't respond. He didn't need to. The town appeared gradually, first a gas station, then a cluster of low wooden buildings, then a single main street lined with shops that had seen better years. It wasn't abandoned, but it wasn't alive either. It existed, like something waiting for permission to breathe again. Silas parked outside a small cafe built of dark timber and stone. The sign above the door creaked gently in the wind. The place had that kind of worn warmth, where everything was a little old, a little uneven, but still standing out of habit. He stepped inside. The bell above the door rang softly. Conversations didn't stop, but they shifted. A few eyes turned, measured, curious. Not hostile, but not welcoming either. Rook followed at heel, his nails clicking lightly against the wooden floor. His presence drew attention immediately, not just because he was a dog, but because of the way he carried himself. Focused, controlled, a quiet authority. Silas chose a table near the window. He didn't rush, didn't order immediately. He simply sat, hands resting loosely on the table, eyes scanning the room with the same calm precision he used on a battlefield. He wasn't looking for danger. He was looking for reaction. It didn't take long. A man at the counter, mid-50s, broad-shouldered, thick gray beard, watched him a little too long before turning away. Another man near the back leaned toward his companion, whispering something behind a half-raised hand. Silas caught the pattern. Recognition. Not of him, of where he had come from. A waitress approached. Late 40s, tired eyes, hair pulled back into a loose knot that had given up trying to stay neat. She moved with efficiency, not warmth. "What can I get you?" she asked. "Coffee," Silas replied. She nodded, then hesitated. Her gaze flicked briefly toward Rook. "Well trained," she said. Silas gave a faint, almost invisible smile. "He's better than most people I've worked with." Something in that answer softened her expression, just slightly. She left without another word. The door opened again. This time, the room didn't shift. It settled. She walked in with the kind of presence that didn't need to announce itself. Mara Bellamy, mid-30s, lean, fit, about 5'6". Her posture was straight but relaxed, like someone who had spent more time outdoors than inside. Her moss-green Ranger parka was worn at the sleeves, the fabric softened by years of use. Beneath it, a gray sweater. Practical. No wasted detail. Her hair, light brown with a hint of copper, was pulled back into a low braid. A few loose strands framed her face, catching the light. Her skin was pale but touched by sun, and her eyes, gray, sharp, observant. They found Silas immediately. She didn't hesitate, didn't look around. She walked straight to his table. "You were up at the dam," she said. Not a question. Silas leaned back slightly, studying her. Was that obvious? Mara pulled out the chair across from him and sat. "Only if you know what to look for." Her eyes shifted briefly to Rook. The dog met her gaze. Still, measured. After a moment, he looked back to Silas. Approval. Mara noticed that. Her lips pressed together slightly. "That dog's not just trained," she said. "He's seen things." Silas didn't answer that. He didn't need to. The coffee arrived. Silas took a slow sip, then set the cup down. "There's something inside that dam," he said. No preamble, no build-up, just truth. Mara didn't react immediately. She watched him, weighed the words, then nodded once. "I figured." Silas raised an eyebrow. "You didn't ask how I knew." "I don't need to," she replied. "People don't come down here asking about that place unless something made them." Silas leaned forward slightly. "There's a signal," he said. "Rhythmic, not natural." Mara's eyes sharpened. "How clear?" "Clear enough." She exhaled slowly, then reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. After a few swipes, she turned the screen toward him. An email, short, time-stamped months ago. No signature beyond a name. Ethan Cole. The message read, "If the water rises wrong, don't open the east gate." Silas stared at it. "That's your missing engineer," he said. Mara nodded. Last thing he ever sent. A chair scraped nearby. Silas turned slightly. The bearded man from the counter had stood. He approached slowly, wiping his hands on a rag. Up close, he was larger than he'd seemed. Thick forearms, weathered skin. The kind of man who had spent decades working with tools, not words. "Jonah Creed," he said. His voice was rough, low, not unfriendly, just worn. Silas stood halfway, out of respect. "Silas." Jonah nodded. His eyes flicked to Rook, then back to Silas. "You said you heard something," he said. Silas held his gaze. "Yes." Jonah studied him for a long moment, then pulled out a chair and sat without asking. "That dam," Jonah said, "was never just a wall." His hands rested flat on the table, scarred, strong. "It's got chambers underneath, pressure control, Flow regulation. Old design, but precise. Silas listened. Jonah continued. If someone knows how to work it, they can make the river do things it shouldn't. Mara leaned forward. Like what? Jonah's jaw tightened slightly. Like flood a valley without warning, he said, or poison a water system slow enough nobody notices until it's too late. Silas felt something settle into place. A shape. Not clear yet, but forming. This wasn't abandoned, he said quietly. Jonah shook his head. No, he replied. It was left alone. Rook suddenly stood. No tension, no growl, just stood. His head turned toward the window, his ears angled, not forward, but slightly to the side, listening to something distant, something outside. Silas followed his gaze. Across the street, a dark SUV sat idling. No headlights, no visible driver. Just there. For a brief moment, the world seemed to narrow. Then, the SUV moved. Slow, deliberate. It rolled forward, then turned toward the road that led back to the dam. Rook's tail lowered slightly. Not fear. Recognition. Silas felt it too. That quiet, tightening awareness. Someone else was listening. Jonah noticed the shift. You see something? He asked. Silas stood. Maybe. Mara followed his gaze. Her expression changed, just slightly. That road doesn't get traffic, she said. Silas nodded. Yeah. Back at the table, the air had changed. Not heavier, sharper. Jonah leaned back slightly. If you heard something in that dam, he said, then someone doesn't want you to. Silas looked at him. You believe me. Jonah gave a dry, humorless chuckle. I worked that structure for 20 years, he said. I know the difference between noise and intention. Mara folded her arms. So, what are we dealing with? She asked. Jonah didn't answer immediately. He stared at the table, then up at Silas. Something that knows that dam better than we do, he said. Silas finished his coffee, stood. Rook moved with him instantly. No command needed. Where are you going? Mara asked. Silas looked toward the road. Back, he said. Jonah frowned. Too soon, he muttered. Silas shook his head. No, he replied quietly. Too late. Outside, the air felt colder. The kind of cold that didn't come from temperature, but from understanding. Silas opened the truck door, paused, then looked down at Rook. You good? He asked. Rook met his gaze. Steady, focused, ready. Silas nodded once. Yeah, he said. Me too. But that wasn't entirely true, because as the engine started and the road stretched back toward the dam, that old feeling came with him. The one he thought he had buried, the one that whispered, You've heard this before. And somewhere behind that thought, another one followed. Don't miss it this time. The road back to the dam felt shorter. Not because the distance had changed, but because something had. Silas drove with both hands steady on the wheel, eyes fixed ahead. The forest closed in tighter as they climbed, branches leaning over the road like quiet witnesses. The sky above had shifted, clouds gathering in thin layers, muting the light just enough to make the world feel slightly off balance. Rook sat upright in the passenger seat. Not tense, not restless, but engaged. His ears moved in small adjustments, tracking something that didn't belong to sound alone. Every so often, his gaze would flick toward the direction of the dam long before it came back into view. Silas noticed. You're already hearing it again, he said quietly. Rook didn't look at him. He didn't need to. They reached the ridge and parked without a word. This time, Silas didn't pause to take in the view. He moved, fast but controlled. Rook was already ahead of him, slipping down the narrow path that led toward the structure. Pine needles shifted underfoot, damp and soft, absorbing sound. The closer they got, the more the dam seemed to press against them. Not visually, but physically. Like a weight. Like pressure. The air grew colder. Not the kind of cold that bit the skin, but the kind that settled into the bones. Silas stepped onto the top of the dam. The same rusted expanse stretched before him, but it no longer felt still. It felt like something holding its breath. Rook didn't stop this time. He moved past the control huts, ignoring the open doors, heading straight toward the far side where the structure narrowed. Then, he veered, abruptly, not toward the edge, but toward a section of the dam Silas hadn't noticed before. A narrow descent, half hidden behind a tangle of overgrowth. Metal steps, old, corroded, barely holding their shape. Silas slowed. "You didn't show me this before," he murmured. Rook stepped onto the first rung without hesitation. That was enough. Silas followed. The metal staircase creaked under their weight, each step echoing softly against the concrete walls that rose around them. The descent wasn't long, but it felt deeper than it should have been. The smell changed first. Less air, more water, and something else. Oil. Old, but not entirely gone. At the base, a narrow walkway ran along the side of the dam, just above the spillway channels. The river moved beneath them, darker here, confined, its voice lower and more focused. Rook stopped, mid-step. His body stiffened, not in fear, but in confusion. That was new. Silas noticed immediately. "What is it?" Rook didn't answer in the way dogs usually did. He didn't point, didn't move. He stood still, processing. His nose lifted slightly, testing the air, then dropped again, closer to the metal railing beside them. Silas stepped forward slowly, placed his hand on the railing. Cold. Still. He waited. Seconds passed. Nothing. Then, a faint tremor. Tap. Tap. Silas leaned closer. "That's different," he whispered. He tapped back. 2 knocks. Waited. Silence stretched. Then, tap. 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 Faster. Shorter. Not the same rhythm as before. Not the same voice. Silas frowned. "That's not him," he said. Footsteps echoed behind them. Heavy. Measured. Silas turned. Jonah Creed descended the metal stairs with the careful weight of someone who knew exactly how far he could trust each step. Up close, the lines in his face looked deeper in this light, carved by years of weather and regret. "You shouldn't have come down here alone," Jonah muttered. Silas gestured toward the railing. "There's more than one signal." Jonah stepped beside him, placed his own hand against the metal, closed his eyes briefly, listened, then exhaled. "I was afraid of that," he said. Mara appeared a moment later, moving faster than Jonah, but just as sure-footed. She crouched slightly near the edge, studying the structure, her sharp eyes tracing the lines where metal met concrete. "What are we dealing with?" she asked. Jonah didn't look at her. He was still focused on the railing. "That's not one person trying to get attention," he said quietly. Silas waited. Jonah opened his eyes. "That's 2 patterns," he continued. "Different timing, different strength." Mara's expression shifted. "You're saying—" Jonah nodded once. "One of them's current," he said. "The other—" He hesitated. Silas finished it. "Old?" Jonah didn't argue. Rook suddenly moved, Not forward, not back. He stepped sideways, quick, sharp, and planted himself between Silas and the spillway opening. His body lowered slightly. Not aggressive, protective. His eyes locked on the dark channel below. Silas followed his gaze. For a moment, he saw nothing. Just water. Then, something shifted. Not in the water itself, but along the concrete wall beside it. A faint mark. Too straight to be natural, too clean to be old. A line scratched into the surface. Silas crouched, ran his fingers along it. Letters, worn but deliberate. He brushed away damp residue and read, "Not alone." He felt it then, not fear, not shock, but something heavier. A realization settling in place. Whatever had been here before had known there would be another. Mara leaned closer. "That's recent?" she asked. Jonah shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "That's been there a while." Silas stood, eyes moving across the structure again. "Then why didn't anyone see it?" Jonah gave a bitter half-smile. "Because nobody was looking," he replied. Rook shifted again. This time he turned away from the railing, toward the wall behind them. Concrete, solid, unbroken. He stepped closer, pressed his head slightly toward it, listening. Silas watched carefully. "Rook." The dog tapped the surface once with his paw. Not scratching, not digging, a signal. Silas placed his hand against the wall. Waited. Nothing. Then, faint, almost lost beneath the sound of water. Knock, slow, heavy, weak, different from the faster pattern at the railing. This one felt strained. Silas's jaw tightened. "That's him," he said. Jonah nodded. "Yeah." Mara stood, eyes scanning the structure. "If he's behind that," she said, "there's a chamber." Jonah turned toward her. "There are several," he replied. "Maintenance pockets, pressure buffers." Silas looked at the wall, then at the spillway, then back again. Pieces began to align. "Two signals," he murmured. "Two locations." Jonah followed his line of thought. "Connected," he said. Mara exhaled slowly. "Which means whoever's inside," she began. Silas finished it. "Isn't the only one who's been there." The wind shifted above them, carrying a low hum through the structure. Not loud, not obvious, but present. Jonah's expression darkened. "That's pressure building," he said. Silas looked at him. "From what?" Jonah didn't hesitate. "Water's rising upstream," he said. "Slow but steady." Mara's eyes narrowed. "That's not in the forecast." Jonah gave her a hard look. "Doesn't have to be," he replied. Silas stepped back from the wall. His mind moved quickly now, not reacting, calculating. "If someone's manipulating flow," he said, "they're using the system." Jonah nodded. "And if they're using the system," he added, "they know exactly what they're doing." Mara crossed her arms. "So we've got someone inside, and someone else working the structure?" Silas looked down at Rook. The dog met his gaze. Steady, certain. No hesitation now. The confusion from earlier was gone. Direction had returned. Silas nodded once. "Then we're not just listening anymore," he said quietly. "We're being answered." The three of them stood there for a moment longer, the sound of water pressing in from below, the faint echoes of something alive within the concrete. The dam didn't feel abandoned anymore. It felt occupied. The wind had changed by the time they climbed back to the top of the dam. It wasn't stronger. It was sharper. It carried something colder than air should have been this time of year, something that didn't belong to weather, but to intention. Silas stepped onto the upper span first, boots landing softly against the rusted concrete. His posture was relaxed, but there was nothing casual about the way his eyes moved. Every angle, every shadow, every open doorway. Rook followed one step behind, close, aligned. Not leading anymore, not searching, guarding. Mara came up next, breathing steady but controlled. She wasn't out of shape, but she wasn't used to moving through tension like this. Her eyes scanned the control huts automatically, instinctively cataloging details the way she had learned to do in the forest, tracking disturbances, reading space. Jonah emerged last, slower, one hand brushing lightly against the railing for balance. He looked older up here than he had below, as if the open sky made the weight of memory sit heavier on his shoulders. They hadn't spoken since leaving the lower level. There was nothing to say that would change what they now knew. The dam wasn't empty, and it wasn't idle. Silas stopped, not abruptly, but with purpose. Rook halted instantly beside him. Mara noticed the shift. "What is it?" she asked quietly. Silas didn't answer. He was looking ahead, not at the structures, not at the spillways, but at the center of the dam, where the main control platform stood. And there, someone was already there. Victor Kane didn't move when they approached. He stood with his back partially turned, looking out over the reservoir as if admiring the view. The man was tall, just over 6 feet, his build lean but controlled, every movement economical. His charcoal coat fell cleanly over his frame, untouched by the grime of the dam around him. He didn't belong here, not visually, not physically, and yet he stood like someone who owned the place. When he turned, it wasn't sudden. It was measured, deliberate. His face was sharp, angular in a way that mirrored Silas's, but without the wear of weather or time. His skin was pale, almost too even. His hair, dark and neatly cut, showed the first signs of silver at the temples, but it looked maintained, intentional. His eyes were the only thing that didn't match the rest of him. Cold, not empty, not angry, just calculating. He studied Silas the way one evaluates a variable. "Silas Wren," Victor said. Not a question. Silas didn't react. "You've been asking about the dam," Victor continued, voice calm, controlled. "That tends to attract attention." Mara stepped slightly to the side, positioning herself without making it obvious. Jonah remained still, his gaze locked on Victor with something deeper than suspicion. Recognition. Silas took one step forward. "And you are?" he asked. Victor's lips curved just slightly. Not a smile, but something close. "Victor Kane," he said. "North Vale Infrastructure." Silas nodded once. "I figured." Rook moved. Not forward, not aggressive. He stepped just enough to place himself between Silas and Victor. Still, silent, blocking. Victor noticed immediately. His gaze dropped briefly to the dog, then back to Silas. "Well trained," he said. Silas didn't look down. "He makes his own decisions," he replied. Victor considered that, then nodded once, as if filing it away. "You shouldn't be here," Victor said. The tone wasn't threatening. It was factual. Mara crossed her arms. "This is public land," she said. Victor glanced at her. "Technically," he replied, "but not for long." Jonah let out a low breath. "That's what this is about," he muttered. Victor turned his attention to him now. "Mr. Creed," he said, "you've always understood how these things work." Jonah's jaw tightened. "I understood enough to walk away," he said. Victor tilted his head slightly. And yet, you came back. Jonah didn't answer. He didn't need to. Silas stepped closer now, closing the distance by just enough to shift the balance. There's someone inside that dam, he said. No hesitation, no games. Victor didn't deny it. That was the first thing that mattered. Instead, he looked past Silas, toward the spillway, then back again. Yes, he said simply. Mara stiffened. Jonah's eyes darkened. Silas didn't move. Alive, he added. Victor nodded. For now. The air changed. Not louder, not heavier, just tighter. Silas studied him. You're keeping him there, he said. Victor didn't flinch. No, he replied. I'm keeping something else in place. Silas narrowed his eyes. What does that mean? Victor took a slow step forward. Not aggressive, not retreating, just adjusting. The dam, he said, was never meant to last this long. Jonah's expression shifted. He knew this part. Victor continued. It was modified, he said. Reinforced, adjusted beyond its original design. Mara frowned. By who? She asked. Victor's gaze flicked to her. By people who believed they could improve it, he said. A pause. Then, they were wrong. Rook's ears twitched. Not toward Victor, not toward the others, toward the water behind the dam. He turned his head slowly, eyes narrowing slightly. Then, he let out a low, controlled sound. Not a growl, not a bark, a warning. Silas followed his gaze. The surface of the reservoir looked still at first, then a ripple, subtle, out of place, not wind-driven, not current, something deeper, a disturbance moving against the natural flow. Victor noticed it too, and for the first time, something in his expression changed. Not fear, not panic, but recognition. Like watching something begin earlier than expected. Silas caught it. You didn't plan for that, he said. Victor's composure returned quickly, but not completely. It's accelerating, he admitted quietly. Mara stepped forward. What is? She demanded. Victor looked at her, then back at Silas, and made a decision. The dam doesn't need to be destroyed, Victor said. His voice was steady again, controlled. It only needs to fail, correctly. Jonah shook his head slowly. No, he said. You're not talking about failure. Victor met his gaze. I'm talking about inevitability, he replied. Silas's voice cut through. What are you really doing? Victor looked at him for a long moment, then answered. There was an incident, he said, years ago. Before closure, before the reports, before the silence. Jonah's breath caught. He knew. Victor continued. A structural instability, he said. Internal, not visible, not acceptable. Mara's eyes widened slightly. You covered it up. Victor didn't deny it. We stabilized it, he corrected. At a cost, Jonah said. Victor nodded. Yes. Silas stepped closer. What cost? Victor held his gaze. A design flaw, he said, one that would eventually surface. Mara's voice tightened. And the man inside? Victor's expression didn't change. He found it, he said. Silas felt the pieces lock into place. He wasn't supposed to, he said. Victor gave a small nod. No, he replied. Jonah looked away. Guilt, heavy, unspoken. So this, Silas said, gesturing around them, this whole thing, Victor finished it, is correction. Silas shook his head. No, he said quietly. It's concealment. Victor didn't argue. If the dam fails naturally, Victor continued, there's no investigation, no liability, no history. Mara stepped forward. You're talking about flooding an entire valley. Victor's eyes didn't waver. I'm talking about preventing a larger collapse later, he said. Silas's jaw tightened. You don't believe that, he said. Victor looked at him, really looked. And for a brief moment, something flickered behind his eyes. Not doubt, something else. Memory. Then it was gone. You should leave, Victor said. Not as a threat, as a conclusion. Silas didn't move. Neither did Rook. Below them, deep within the structure, something struck again. Faint. But there, and this time, it didn't sound like a signal. It sounded like time. Running out. Rain didn't fall the way it was supposed to. It didn't begin with a storm. It began with a whisper. A fine mist at first, so light it barely disturbed the air, settling softly over the dam, the trees, the silent structures that had stood for decades, without question. Then it changed. The temperature rose. Not enough to notice immediately, just enough to matter. Silas felt it before he saw it. A subtle shift against his skin, a warmth that didn't belong this far north. Not this early in the season. He looked up. Clouds had thickened above the reservoir, low and heavy, pressing down as if the sky itself had lowered its weight onto the land. Rain on snow. Wrong. Rook moved first. The German shepherd stepped away from Silas, paws silent against the damp concrete. His body was tighter now, more purposeful. His head lifted slightly, nose catching something in the air. Not just scent, but change. His ears angled. Tracking, calculating. Silas followed his gaze. The reservoir behind the dam was no longer still. Small ripples had begun to gather, overlapping each other in irregular patterns. Not the kind made by wind, but by pressure beneath the surface. Jonah stepped forward, his boots scraping lightly against the ground as he moved closer to the edge. He didn't speak immediately. He didn't need to. His eyes had already said enough. This is it, he muttered finally. Mara turned sharply. What do you mean, this is it? Jonah gestured toward the water. Warm rain, he said, on frozen ground. Snowpack hasn't drained yet. Silas watched the surface carefully. The movement wasn't dramatic, but it was steady, relentless. Jonah continued, voice tightening slightly. The system's already been adjusted, he said. Flow regulators, pressure buffers, they're out of alignment. Mara shook her head. That doesn't happen on its own. Jonah looked at her. No, he said quietly. It doesn't. Silas turned. Victor Kane was gone. No footsteps, no sound. Just absence. Like he had never been there at all. Silas didn't waste time looking for him. He already knew what that meant. He's done what he needed to do, Silas said. Mara's jaw clenched. And left us with it. The rain grew heavier. Not violent, but constant. Each drop small, precise, adding weight without force. The kind of rain that didn't look dangerous until it was too late. Rook moved again, faster now. He crossed the dam in a tight line, stopping briefly near the railing where they had first detected the signal. Then he turned sharply and ran toward the far end, toward the eastern side. Silas watched him, not surprised, just certain. You see it too, he murmured. Rook didn't look back. Mara followed, boots slipping slightly on the wet surface. Where's he going? Silas started after him. Where it matters, he replied. The eastern spillway came into view gradually. Unlike the central sections, this one was partially sealed, older, reinforced, its edges marked by heavier steel plating that had resisted decay better than the rest. Too well. Jonah slowed as they approached. His eyes narrowed. "That shouldn't look like that," he said. Silas glanced at him. "What do you mean?" Jonah pointed. "Those bolts," he said. "They've been turned recently." Mara stepped closer, crouching slightly to examine the metal. She ran her fingers along the edges. The paint was chipped, freshly. "Someone's been here," she said. Rook stopped abruptly, right at the base of the eastern gate. He didn't sniff, didn't circle. He just stood. Then, slowly, he lowered himself. Not lying down, not sitting casually. He positioned his body directly in front of the sealed section, paws braced, chest forward, blocking it. And then, he refused to move. Silas felt it instantly. That wasn't hesitation. That wasn't confusion. That was a decision. Rook wasn't just finding something. He was guarding it. Silas stepped closer. "Move," he said quietly. Rook didn't. Not even a shift. Just a brief flick of his ear. "No." Silas stared at him. For a long second, neither moved. Then Silas exhaled and understood. "You're telling me it's here," he said softly. Rook held position, steady, certain. Jonah approached carefully. His hand hovered near the metal panel without touching it. "This is an auxiliary discharge gate," he said. "Built to relieve pressure when the main system gets overloaded." Mara looked at him. "And if it's tampered with?" Jonah didn't answer immediately. He didn't need to. Silas finished it. "It sends the pressure somewhere else." Jonah nodded slowly. "Exactly." The rain intensified, not dramatically, but enough. Water began to run in thin streams along the concrete, tracing lines that hadn't been visible before. The seams between sections darkened, the structure revealing its age in ways it had hidden just hours ago. Silas placed his hand against the metal gate. Cold, but not dead. There was something beneath it. A faint vibration, slower than before, weaker. But there. He leaned closer. "Hey," he said quietly. "If you can hear me, do it again." The rain tapped steadily around them. The river below had grown louder now, its voice rising as the flow increased. For a moment, nothing came. Then, a single knock. Faint. Barely there. But real. Mara inhaled sharply. Jonah closed his eyes briefly. Silas didn't move. His hand remained against the metal. "He's right behind this," Mara whispered. Silas nodded. The sound of rushing water deepened. Not louder, lower, heavier. Jonah's eyes snapped open. "That's not good," he said. Silas looked at him. "What changed?" Jonah pointed toward the spillway channel below. "The flow's shifting," he said. "That means pressure's building upstream faster than it's releasing." Mara straightened. "How fast?" Jonah hesitated. Then, "Faster than we can wait," he said. Silas stepped back, looked at the gate, then at the rising water, then at Rook. The dog finally looked at him. Just once. No fear, no doubt. Just clarity. Two choices. Wait for help, call it in, let procedure take over, or go down, now, risk it. Because whoever was inside didn't have time. Mara spoke first. "We need to call this in," she said. "Get proper authorization." "There isn't time," Silas cut in. Jonah nodded reluctantly. "He's right," he said. "If that pressure hits the wrong threshold, Mara shook her head. "You don't even know what's down there," she said. Silas looked at her, calm, steady. "I don't need to," he replied. "I know someone's still alive." The rain fell harder now, not violent, but undeniable. The kind that didn't ask for permission. The kind that changed things whether you were ready or not. Silas reached for his pack, checked his flashlight, his knife, his watch. Simple motions, familiar, grounding. He stepped toward the gate, then paused, looked down at Rook. "You coming?" Rook stood instantly. No hesitation, no delay. Silas nodded once. Decision made. "We're going in." The metal door didn't open easily. It resisted. Not because it was locked, but because time had settled into it, layered itself into every hinge and seam. Rust groaned as Silas forced it wider, the sound echoing hollow into the darkness below. A breath of cold air rose up to meet him, damp, heavy, carrying the smell of metal, water, and something human. Silas didn't hesitate. He stepped inside. The ladder dropped straight down, narrow, steep, each rung slick with moisture, worn smooth from years of use long since abandoned. Silas descended carefully, boots finding each step by instinct more than sight. His flashlight cut a thin beam through the darkness, revealing walls of raw concrete and rusted piping that ran like veins along the shaft. Behind him, the rain above faded, replaced by something else, a deeper sound, water moving through confined space. Rook didn't follow. He stayed above. That was intentional. Silas trusted it. At the bottom, the tunnel opened just enough for him to stand fully upright. Barely. The ceiling pressed low, forcing him into a slight crouch as he moved forward. Water ran along the floor, shallow but fast, pulling at his boots with quiet persistence. The air was colder here, and thinner, not in oxygen, in feeling, like the space itself didn't want to hold anything alive. Silas moved slowly, light sweeping across the walls, pipes, valves, old control wheels, everything coated in a thin sheen of moisture. Everything still functional, if someone knew how to use it. He stopped, listened. There, faint. Not through metal this time, through air. A sound, rough, uneven, breathing. Silas turned the corner and found him. Ethan Cole sat against the far wall, half collapsed into himself. He looked smaller than he should have. Not physically, but diminished. His frame was gaunt, muscles drawn tight from dehydration and exhaustion. His face was sharp, cheekbones pronounced beneath skin that had gone pale gray in the dim light. A beard had grown unevenly across his jaw, patchy and unkempt. His dark hair clung damply to his forehead. But his eyes? They were still there, sharp, focused, aware. They snapped toward the light, toward Silas. For a moment, neither man spoke. Then, "You're real," Ethan rasped. His voice was dry, cracked from disuse. Silas crouched slightly, lowering the light. "Yeah," he said. "I'm real." Ethan let out something that might have been a laugh, or a breath he'd been holding too long. "Took you long enough," he muttered. Silas scanned him quickly. No major visible injuries, but weak, very weak. "How long?" Silas asked. Ethan swallowed. "Long enough to forget what day it is," he said. His gaze flicked past Silas toward the tunnel behind him, then back. "You shouldn't have come down here," he added. Silas didn't answer that. He was already looking beyond Ethan, at the system. The control assembly sat just behind him, not large, but complex. Valves, pressure regulators, manual overrides. And it was wrong. Not broken, not destroyed, just misaligned, subtly, deliberately. Silas stepped closer. His hand hovered over one of the main valves. It vibrated, not violently, but enough. Ethan saw where he was looking. "They shifted it," he said. Silas glanced back. "Who?" Ethan didn't answer directly. "Doesn't matter," he said. "What matters is it's building." Silas nodded once. He could feel it. The system was holding more than it should. Water surged slightly along the floor, higher than before, still shallow, but rising. "You need to get me out," Ethan said. Silas looked at him, then at the valve, then back again. Time compressed, not visibly, but internally, measured in decisions. "You know what this does?" Silas said quietly. Ethan nodded. "Yeah," he replied. Silas exhaled slowly. "If I move you first," he said, "this doesn't get fixed in time." Ethan didn't argue. He didn't plead. He just watched him. Above them, through layers of concrete and metal, a sound cut through, sharp, controlled, rook, not barking randomly, not calling out. 3 short barks. Pause. 2. Pause. 3. Silas froze. His eyes lifted instinctively, not to see, but to listen. The pattern hit him immediately. Not emotion, not instinct. Code. Ethan's head tilted slightly. Recognition. "That's," he started. Silas nodded. "Yeah." Ethan exhaled, a faint, strained smile crossing his face. "I taught him that," he said. Silas's chest tightened. Rook hadn't just reacted. He had translated. Silas looked back at the system, then at Ethan. "You're telling me to fix it first," he said. Ethan didn't hesitate. "Yes." Water crept higher, now touching the edges of Ethan's boots. Silas turned. No more hesitation. He moved to the valve, hands steady, mind clear. The world narrowed. He gripped the wheel, pulled. It resisted, then shifted. Metal screamed as the mechanism moved for the first time in months, maybe years. Water surged, then redirected. The vibration changed. Not gone, but controlled. The tunnel groaned, a low, deep sound that ran through the walls. Silas held the position, waited, measured. The system stabilized, for now. But the water didn't stop rising. Silas turned back. Ethan's eyes were already on him. "You did it," he said. Silas shook his head. "Not yet." He moved quickly now, crossed the space, dropped beside Ethan. "Can you stand?" he asked. Ethan tried, failed. His body trembled under the effort. "Not fast," he admitted. Silas didn't waste time. He shifted, pulling Ethan's arm over his shoulder, lifting him with controlled force. "Then we move slow," he said. The water was mid-calf now, cold, pulling, each step heavier than the last. Behind them, the system hummed, holding, barely. They reached the ladder. Silas looked up. Darkness, distance, time. "Climb," he said. Ethan shook his head weakly. "I can't." "You can," Silas cut in. No anger, just certainty. Ethan grabbed the first rung. His hand slipped. Silas steadied him. Again. Ethan tried. This time he held. They moved. One rung, then another. Slow, painfully slow. Water surged behind them, higher now, faster. Halfway up, Ethan faltered. His grip loosened. His body sagged. Silas locked one arm around him, holding him in place. "You're not done," Silas said quietly. Ethan's breathing was ragged. "I'm trying," he rasped. Silas leaned closer. "I know," he said. Above, a shape appeared. Rook, silhouetted against the gray light, waiting. Ethan saw him. A faint sound escaped his throat. Not quite a laugh, not quite a cry. "You waited," he whispered. Silas pushed. One more rung, then another. Hands reached down. Mara, Jonah. They pulled Ethan up, then Silas. They collapsed onto the wet concrete above, breathing hard, alive. Below them, the tunnel remained, water still rising, but slower now, controlled. Silas rolled onto his back, staring up at the sky. Rain hit his face, cold, real. Rook pressed against his side, solid, warm. Silas closed his eyes briefly, not in exhaustion, in completion, because this time he hadn't ignored it. Morning didn't arrive all at once. It crept in, slowly, like the world itself was unsure whether it was safe to begin again. A pale light stretched across the dam, touching the wet concrete, the rusted railings, the places where water had carved thin lines through age and neglect. The storm had passed, but it had not erased what had happened. It had only revealed it. Silas sat on the edge of the control platform, boots planted, elbows resting loosely on his knees. His olive field jacket was darker now, soaked and drying unevenly in the cold air. Drops of water clung to the seams, catching the faint sunlight. He didn't look tired. He looked settled. Beside him, Rook lay on the concrete. The German shepherd's body was relaxed, but not at rest. His ears moved occasionally, small adjustments responding to shifts in sound too subtle for most to notice. His eyes remained half open, scanning without urgency, but never fully disengaging. Watching, always watching. A few yards away, Mara Bellamy stood near the spillway, speaking into a handheld radio. Her voice was steady, controlled, though her posture carried the residue of the night before. Shoulders slightly tighter than usual, movements more deliberate. "Yes, the structure's stable for now," she said. "Temporary adjustment only. We'll need a full inspection team." She paused, listened. Her expression shifted, less tension, more clarity. "Understood," she added. "We'll hold the site." She lowered the radio and exhaled, then turned. Her gaze landed on Silas. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then she walked toward him. "You stayed," she said. It wasn't a question. Silas nodded once. "Yeah." Mara crossed her arms lightly. "You didn't have to." Silas looked out across the reservoir. The water had calmed, not still, but no longer threatening. "I know," he said. There was no pride in it, no weight, just truth. Behind them, Jonah Creed leaned against one of the support beams, his posture slightly hunched, hands resting on his thighs. He looked older now than he had the day before, as if something he had carried for years had finally been set down, and in doing so, had left him exposed. Ethan Cole sat nearby, wrapped in a thermal blanket Mara had pulled from the emergency kit. He looked better than he had in the tunnel, but only just. His face still carried the sharp edges of dehydration and exhaustion, but the color had begun to return faintly to his skin. His eyes, though, they hadn't changed. Still sharp, still aware, still thinking. "You knew," Ethan said quietly. Jonah looked up. Their eyes met. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Jonah nodded. "I suspected," he admitted. Ethan's jaw tightened. "That's not the same thing." Jonah didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. "I should have said something," he said. Ethan looked away. Not in anger, in understanding, which somehow felt heavier. Silas listened but didn't interrupt. This wasn't his conversation. It didn't need him. Mara stepped closer to Ethan, crouching slightly to check his condition. "You're going to need real medical attention," she said. Ethan gave a faint, dry smile. "I've had worse," he replied. She didn't smile back. "I'm sure you have," she said. "That doesn't mean you ignore it." Ethan nodded once. He respected that. The radio crackled again. Mara stood, responding briefly, then turned back to the group. "They're sending a team," she said. "State investigators, structural engineers, the whole package." Silas didn't react. He already knew what that meant. Questions, reports, control. "Victor won't be here when they arrive," Ethan said. Silas glanced at him. "You're sure?" Ethan nodded. "He doesn't wait around for consequences," he said. There was no bitterness in his voice, just certainty. Rook stood. Without warning, his body shifted from rest to alert in a single motion, smooth, controlled, immediate. His head turned toward the far end of the dam. Not the spillway, not the gate. Somewhere else. His ears angled sharply, his gaze locked. Silas followed it. There was nothing there. At least, nothing visible. But Rook took a step forward. Then another, slow, deliberate. He stopped near a section of railing untouched by the night's events, lowered his head slightly, and listened. Silas stood, walked toward him. "What is it?" he asked quietly. Rook didn't respond. He didn't move. He simply held position, focused on something beneath the surface. Not the water, not the metal. Something deeper. Ethan noticed. "What's he doing?" he asked. Silas didn't answer immediately. He reached out, placed his hand lightly against the railing, waited. Nothing. Then, just for a fraction of a second, a faint vibration. Gone almost as soon as it appeared. Silas's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes did. Ethan leaned forward slightly. "You felt that?" he asked. Silas nodded once. Ethan swallowed. "That shouldn't still be happening," he said. Jonah stepped closer now, his brow furrowed. "What do you mean, still?" Ethan hesitated, then answered. "That system," he said slowly, "wasn't isolated." Silas turned. "What?" Ethan met his gaze. "There's more than one pressure network," he said. The words landed quietly, but heavily. Mara looked between them. "You're saying this wasn't just one setup?" Ethan shook his head. "No," he said. "It was a framework." Silas looked back at Rook. The dog remained still, listening, waiting. The wind picked up slightly, brushing across the dam, carrying the scent of wet concrete and distant pine. The world seemed normal again. Almost. "Then this isn't over," Mara said. Not fear, not panic, just realization. Silas nodded. "No," he said. "It's not." The investigators arrived by mid-afternoon. 2 vehicles, clean, official, out of place. A woman stepped out first, mid-40s, tall, composed. Her posture was straight, efficient. Her dark hair was pulled into a tight bun at the back of her head, not a strand out of place. Her face was sharp, controlled, her expression neutral in the way of someone trained to observe without reacting. "Agent Naomi Kerr," she introduced herself. Her voice was calm, precise. She wore a navy field jacket with a small state insignia on the sleeve, dark tactical pants, and boots built for terrain rather than comfort. Her eyes moved quickly, assessing everything, stopping briefly on Silas, then Rook, then back again. "You're the one who went inside," she said. Silas nodded. "Yes, ma'am." She didn't respond to the formality. She simply noted it. Naomi moved through the site methodically, documenting, photographing, asking questions in a way that didn't invite unnecessary answers. Ethan spoke with her, carefully. Jonah filled in details where he could. Mara stayed close, ensuring nothing was overlooked. Silas remained where he was, watching. At one point, Naomi approached him again. "You've done this before," she said. Not a question. Silas looked at her. "Yes." She studied him. "You followed instinct," she said. Silas shook his head slightly. "No," he replied. "I listened." Naomi considered that, then nodded once. As the sun dipped lower, the activity slowed. Reports began. Equipment was marked. The dam, once silent, was now accounted for, at least on paper. Silas stood near the edge again, looking out, not searching, not waiting, just present. Mara approached him one last time. "You're really staying?" she asked. Silas didn't look at her. "Yeah." She hesitated, then asked, "Why?" Silas took a breath, slow, measured. "Because last time," he said, "I heard something like that." He paused, just long enough. "And I walked away." Mara didn't respond. She didn't need to. Rook settled beside him again, close, steady. A wooden board leaned against the wall of the control hut. Simple, unfinished. Silas picked it up, turned it over, then set it against the railing. He didn't rush, didn't overthink it. He pulled a marker from his pack and wrote, "If you hear something, listen twice." The words looked uneven, imperfect, but they held. Night came quietly. The investigators packed up. The vehicles left. The dam returned to silence. Silas remained. Rook lay beside him. The air cooled, the wind softened, and for a long time, there was nothing. Then, very faint, almost imagined, a single sound. Knock. Rook's ear twitched. Silas didn't move. He just listened. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with thunder or light breaking through the sky. Sometimes they come quietly, through a loyal dog who refuses to walk away, through a man who chooses to listen when it would be easier to ignore, or through a faint signal that most people would never hear. In our daily lives, we all face moments like that. Moments when something feels off, when a small voice inside tells us to stop, to look closer, to care a little more. And in those moments, faith is not about certainty. It is about choosing to act anyway. It is about believing that doing the right thing matters, even when no one is watching. God often works through ordinary people, through courage, through compassion, through the quiet decision to stay when others leave. And just like Silas, we are not always called to be heroes, but we are always called to be faithful. If this story meant something to you, take a moment to share it with someone who might need hope today. Leave a comment and tell us what part stayed with you. And don't forget to subscribe to Veteran Dog Stories, so we can continue bringing you stories of faith, courage, and the unbreakable bond between humans and their canine partners. May God bless you and your loved ones. May He guide your steps, protect you in every storm, and remind you that even in the quietest places, you are never alone.